Hello students, welcome back. Once again, this is Mrs. Mercado speaking. This is the final lecture. This is lecture C over chapter 26, which deals with capital investment analysis. Now this last problem that I'm covering, which is problem 26-1A, is very important because you are going to have something similar to this on your exam. So it's very important that you pay close attention and that you understand what I'm doing so you can be able to get it right on your homework, practice, and then be able to master it on your upcoming exam. Okay, so I'm going to jump right in to the problem that we're going to be working on. This is problem 26-1A. It does include a lot of information, so do not get overwhelmed. Okay, just take it a step at a time. So in this problem, they're asking us to calculate the average rate of return method, the net present value method, and the analysis for a service company. Okay, so it says, the Capital Investment Committee of Arches Landscaping Company is considering two capital investments. The estimating operating income and net cash flows from each investment are as follows. Now, this is a very interesting problem because they have two options, the front end loader and the greenhouse. Both options are for 5 years, okay? So they're very compatible projects. Both projects are for 5 years. Both projects are going to give you operating income of $56,250, okay? And you're going to have net cash flows of $131,250, okay? So you're going to get the same income. You're going to get the same cash flow for both projects, and they're both for 5 years. So now you have to decide, using this information provided, which one is the best option for us, okay? Each project requires the same amount of investment. So you're going to invest $75,000, okay? You're going to have operating income of $56,250 over the 5-year period, and you're going to have net cash flows of $131,250 for both projects. They're identical, okay? We have the straight line depreciation that will be used, and no residual value is expected for either of the projects, okay? The committee has selected a rate of return of 12% for purposes of the net present value analysis, okay? So, the first thing that they're wanting us to do is to compute the average rate of return for each investment, okay? Usually we would have two separate calculations, one for the front end loader, one for the greenhouse. Now, in this particular case, our annual income, which is our income, is the same for both projects, $56,250, $56,250. My investment for both projects is $75,000, okay? So I'm just going to do one calculation for purposes of this problem because both the income and the investment are the same for both projects. So regardless which project I choose or which project I'm analyzing here, the figures are the same. It's $56,250 of income and $75,000 is my investment, okay? So the first thing we have to do is we have to calculate our average annual income, okay? So I'm not going to go over step 1 and step 2 like I did in the prior problem. By now we should be comfortable doing the steps. So I'm just going to do the steps here. So the first step is, to get your average annual income. And I'm going to do that. My income is going to be $56,250, okay? And then I'm going to divide by how many years is these projects for? These are for 5 years, okay? And then I'm going to divide that by my average investment. And for my average investment, I have my investment amount for both projects is $75,000, okay? I'm going to add my residual value. In this case, my residual value was 0. And then I'm going to divide by 2, okay? Now let me center these, okay? Okay, now I can be able to calculate my amounts, okay? So let's see what we get. Oh, sorry about that. I got super excited here with my mouse. Okay. Okay. So, the first component we have is $56,250. $56,250 divided by 5 years. That gives me $11,250. Okay. And then I'm going to divide by, I've got 75,000 plus 0 is 75,000, and I'm going to divide by 2. That gives me 37,500. Okay. And now I can do my final calculation, and then that's going to give me 11,250 divided by 37,500, and then I'm going to multiply times 100 to give me a percentage of 30%. Okay, so I'm going to do my actual right here. So then that's going to be 11,250 divided by 37,500, and then it's in a percentage format, so that'll be 30%. So my average rate of return for both projects, because both projects are investment of 75,000 and both projects are going to give me income of 56,250. Okay, now if the problem that you're working on has different amounts for each of the projects, you're going to have to do these calculations for each of the projects separately. Okay, I want to specify the reason that I'm doing it together for both projects is because both the income and the investment for both projects are the same. If your projects differ, then you have to do the calculation for each project separately and calculate the average rate of return for each project separately. Okay, so the average rate of return for each investment is 30%. Okay, that's the first requirement. The second requirement is the net present value for each investment. If they're asking us to use the present value appearing in Exhibit 2, which I've copied here into the screen, for this chapter. We're going to round the present values to the nearest dollar. Okay? So I've created a little table here. That way it's easier for us to understand. So I've set up the 5 years. Okay? We need to calculate our present value rate using the present value table provided. We're going to enter those here. But first I'm going to enter the information that I know. Okay? Do we know our cash flows? Okay? Well, yes, we do. We know our cash flows because it's provided. Okay? Cash flows for my loader are right there. And then we have our cash flows for our greenhouse right here. Okay? So we've got our cash flows provided. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter my cash flows in these two columns. So I'm just going to copy and paste this information over here. So I've got 40,000 for my loader, 35,000, 22,000, 18,000, and 16,250. And then for my greenhouse, I've got 26,250, and that's the same amount for every year. Okay. And then we get a total for each of the columns. Okay. Okay. So all I did was copy the information from my cash flows for the loader and the greenhouse over here. Okay. That was the first step that I did. Copy and paste. Now the second step that I need to do is I need to figure out my present value rates. Okay. Now the problem says here that the committee has selected a rate of 12%. Okay, 12% right here. Okay. So when we look at our tables, we're going to be looking at the 12% column, and we have 5 years. And we're doing the present values of our cash flows year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to look at our table, and we're looking at the first 5 years. Okay, so this is going to be the numbers that we're looking at. Years 1 through 5. Okay. So these are what we're looking at, years 1 through 5, and these are the rates that I'm looking at. So for year 1, it's going to be 0.893. For year 2, it'll be 0.797. For year 3, it'll be 0.712. For year 4, it'll be 0.636. And for year 5, it will be 0.567. Okay, so all I did was get years 1 through 5 for my 12% rate. Okay, once you do that, then you have to multiply, okay, your cash flow times your present value rate right there. Okay, so you're going to multiply the cash flow for each of the projects, okay, for each of the years, times the present value rate for that year. Okay, and you're going to do that for every single year. Just make sure that you multiply it by the right rate. Okay, so you multiply the cash flow times the rate. Okay, cash cash flow times the rate. Okay. Now you're going to do the same thing, and we're going to round this up to $1. Okay. For the greenhouse, you're going to get your cash flow from the greenhouse, which is the 26,250 times the rate. Okay. Now if you notice, they're all the same. Okay. 26,250. So that would be the same for the greenhouse has a steady cash flow every year. It'll be the same amount. So we're going to get the cash flow times the rate for that year. And we are looking at whole numbers. Okay. It says round to the nearest dollar. So make sure when you're rounding, you round to the nearest dollar. Okay. Okay. So all I did was multiply the cash flow, either the front loader or the greenhouse, times your present value rate provided here. Okay. And then once we do that, we can get a total for each column. Okay. Okay. That way we can get our total present value of the net cash flow. Okay. Now, that is the present value of my future cash flows years 1 through 5. Okay. The total right here. One gives me 99,941. The other one gives me 94,631. Now, I need to deduct the amount that I invested into these projects. Okay. My investment into each of the projects is 75,000. So I need to deduct those 75,000 from each of the projects. Okay. Get 75,000. And there's 75,000 for both because it says that each project requires an investment of 75,000. So my investment for both projects is the same. Now I can calculate my net present value by getting your total present value of your cash flows minus your amount invested. Okay, so the 99,941 minus the 75,000 gives you 24,941. Okay, for the greenhouse, it gives you 19,631. And how do we get that 19,631? The 94,631 minus the 75,000 gives you the 19,631. Now, where I've seen a lot of issues with this problem is students pick up the wrong rates. Okay, make sure that you look at the rate that they're giving you. 12%. How many years? 5. You have to pick up the rate for every year. This is the present value of $1 at a compound interest. Okay, so year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each of those has different rates. Okay, we're looking at the 12%. Okay. So now the second requirement asks us to calculate the net present value of each investment. So the net present value for my loader is 24,941. The present value for my greenhouse is 19,631. Okay. Now the last requirement says to prepare a brief report for the Capital Investment Committee, advising them on the relative merits of the two investments. Okay. I'm not going to set it up in a report form, okay? And in Cengage, you're going to be asked to kind of like fill in the blanks. You're not going to have to type out a report, but I am going to highlight some key points, okay? So, key points. I'm going to just put here key points, okay? That way, it'll just be brief. So, the first key point that we have is that both projects offer the same average annual rate of return of 30%. Okay. So both projects offer the 30% average rate of return. And remember, we talked about this. The reason that I only did one calculation is because both projects have the same operating income and they have the same amount of the investment. So both projects are at the same level when it comes to calculating our average rate of return. They have a high return, 30%. Okay. Now something else to note. Okay. So although both projects exceed the selected rate established, remember they wanted to earn 12%. Well, how much are they earning? 30%. So both projects exceed the selected rate established for, let me just format this, for discounted cash flows. The front-end loader offers a larger net present value. Okay, so the loader gives you offers a larger net present value of 24,941 in comparison to the greenhouse of 19,631. Okay, the reason the front end loader has a larger net present value is because larger cash flows occur earlier in time compared to the greenhouse. Okay, if we looked at our cash flows, the front loader gets 40,000 the first year, while the greenhouse only gets 26,250. The second year, the loader gets 35,000 versus 26,250. So it's accumulating higher interest at the beginning of the investment here. Okay, and then towards the end, it dwindles down, but the higher cash flow is coming in the first couple of years. Okay. So if you had to make a choice, okay, thus, if only one of the two projects can be accepted, the front end loader would be the more attractive option. Okay, so yes, both projects are going to give you an average rate of return of 30%, which exceeds the 12% that management had set. So that's pretty good. They're both giving you a good rate of return. But if you had to choose between both options, we would choose the front end loader because that gives me the net present value higher than the greenhouse. Okay, and the reason that we have higher for the front end loader, even though both of us have the same amount of total cash flows and the same amount of the operating income, is because our front end loader gets higher returns at the beginning, the first 2 years, in comparison to the greenhouse. The greenhouse has steady annual cash flows of 26,250, while the front end loader has higher amounts years 1 and 2. Okay, so using that data provided, the net present value for my loader is higher, and that would be the option that I would accept based on the information provided. Okay, so that is the second problem. Like I said, it's very easy if you set it up on Excel. That way you just, plug in the information. These two figures are provided in the problem. All I did was copy and paste. Once I do that, I bring in my rates from my table. Make sure that you're using the correct table. Okay, you bring in your rates for years 1 through 5, and then just multiply the cash flow times the rate for the loader, the cash flow times the rate for the greenhouse. Okay, so you will be having something similar to this on your test. Okay, so that is basically it for this lecture. Please, if you have questions, do not hesitate to reach out to me to get them clarified. Thank you and good luck. Until next time.